morning, good afternoon, good evening, or it's 2 a.m. Get a bit early. This is Eagle Eyes on Tech. I am Eagle Falcon. Today I've decided, before Thanksgiving, before the holiday season, I want to take a close look at one of my favorite versions of tablets. If there's one thing you've learned about me so far, is that I don't like making compromises. And one thing that's really nice about these particular tablets, they all run x86. This means they run full desktop operating systems. In this case, it's Windows 10. Because Apple doesn't want to make a Mac tablet yet. Seriously, Apple, why does the iPad Pro run iOS? Last I checked, professionals use real applications, not phone apps on a giant screen. Granted, phone apps are getting a lot more sophisticated, but they're not there yet. They simply aren't. I would have loved to see El Capitan secretly have some touch capability in it. That would have been pretty neat. Anyway, we got a lot of tablets to cover. I've covered, my research went and covered like 6 manufacturers, I think. I lost track. I've got them all in front of me, just kind of layer by layer by layer, and as I go through each manufacturer, I'll get down to it. Stay tuned for the middle. I do have a Computer Wars planned, and the Mac Pro is finally getting what it deserves. So yeah. Alright, so let's start with the Dell's, the gold standard of mediocrity. And, well, there's only 4. I was kind of disappointed by that. I expected more out of them. First off, we have the Dell Venue 8 Pro. This is one I had before it was stolen. And unfortunately, this newer version of what I had got worse. I don't know how it happened. We've got an Intel Atom 1.8 gigahertz quad-core processor in there. Decent processor, but you're not going to get anything real work-related done. You're not going to run CAD on it. You're not going to run any modern games on it. Don't even try. You can get something archaic running in there. Ooh, like some Command & Conquer. That'd be nice. But the biggest disappointing thing about this is the RAM. One thing I've stated before is that Windows 10 and Windows 8 and Windows 7 and basically every version of Windows past XP, Vista included, all require pretty much 4 gigs of RAM to run smoothly. Let me explain a little bit what happens. RAM is memory within the computer that the operating system stores information on it. When the computer runs out of RAM, that the RAM is full, it then goes into what's called swap. Swap means that any additional storage that RAM would use is now being used up by the hard drive or the main storage. In the case of a hard drive, your computer then starts running very, very, very slow because the hard drive works much slower than your RAM does. SSDs, on the other hand, they work slower than RAM. Faster than hard drives, of course, but the other thing that happens is that because you're constantly using the SSD, you are shaving the life off the SSD at a much faster rate than you normally would. Now, I'm not saying that going into swap is going to kill an SSD in like a week. Nothing like that, no. It just means that instead of 20 years, you might shave off 3 months of that by going into swap. At most. In fact, that's even over-exaggerating it. It's still kind of one of those things you gotta keep in mind, because hard drives you could theoretically run forever until something mechanically fails. Solid-state drives have a specific length of time that they can work. They only have so many writes they can take. After that, they fail. You could say the same thing about a hard drive, but it's not the same. There's no definite number like there is with a solid-state. So, with that said, that means the more RAM you have, the less likely you're going to end up in swap. The OS takes up about 1.5 to 2 gigs of RAM, which then leaves you which if you have 4 gigs, leaves you about 2.5 to 3 gigs of RAM left for anything else you're doing. So when I see this Dell Venue Pro running with 1 gig of RAM, I am offended. This is terrible. Absolutely terrible. It goes into swap instantly. Just like that. You fire it up into swap. It's now using the SSD to store. Now, for those of you who are paranoid, I also want to restate that operating systems, although they do use up RAM, whenever they no longer need something, it's cleared from RAM. So, for example, I'm using up a lot of RAM because I have 18 quadrillion pages open right now. But the moment I close them all, I'll say 1 gigabyte of RAM that's used to do that, which is grossly over-exaggerating, is then cleared from RAM. So, before anyone starts getting paranoid and thinking, oh god, I need to add more RAM, I need 64 gigs of RAM, you don't. You need 4 gigs at a minimum, 8 gigs to be, way overkill. And if you go higher than that, you are doing something very specific, like workstation workloads. So, we're done with the Dell Venue. This thing has 32 gigs of storage. Whatever. Who cares? It has 1 gig of RAM. Even the fact that it's only a $170 tab or $180 tablet should be ignored. Don't buy this thing. Period. It's got 1 gig of RAM. Gross. Go away. Go get anything else. So we move on to the Dell Venue Pro 10. This one's a 10-inch screen. It's got a dockable keyboard. Everything seems nice. 1.83 gigahertz quad-core Atom. We have 32 gigs of storage. It's okay. 2 gigs of RAM. What did I just say about RAM? This is gross. It needs to go away. Even though it's at $280. That's nice. Go away. The Dell Venue 11 Pro. This is now an 11-inch laptop. We are now running a Core M processor. Dual core, about 2 gigahertz. It's okay. We've got 64 gigs of storage on there. Got an 11-inch screen. I'm trying to find the resolution, and I can't now. It's probably safe to say it's 1366 by 768 because every single budget tablet on the face of the earth runs it at about that resolution. Oh, no, never mind. I lied. It is not that number. It is full 1920 by 1080. So it is a 1080p screen on a 10-inch device. So unless you have a 4K TV, whatever 40, 50, 60-inch TV you have in there, that resolution on a 10-inch. So that's actually really nice. The problem, though, is the price. This thing starts at $700. Pass. Next up, and that's it for the Dell tablet line. So if you want Windows 10 and on a tablet, you're now looking at the XPS line, which has a 2-in-1. You get this thing with the keyboard. This thing is a 6th generation Core M processor. That's nice. 8 gigs of RAM. Awesome. Solid. More than I'll ever need. 128 gigs of solid state storage. That's excellent. Got an Intel HD 515, 12.5-inch screen, 1080p. That's great. How much is this thing? $1,000. Just why bother? For those of you who don't remember last week, when we were going over the Surfaces, the Surface Pro started at $800. With better specs than this. Dell, what are you doing? Seriously, what are you doing in this category? Up your game. This is atrocious. Nothing in the entire Dell lineup is even acceptable, because everything in it is too expensive. You know, the Venue 11 was decent, but for an Atom at $700? What are you doing? The iPad Pro is better than that. Granted, the iPad Pro runs a phone operating system, not a actual operating system. Anyway, that's it for Dell. A terrible disappointment all around. So, let's move on to HP. HP starts off with a rather interesting little laptop convertible. It's called the HP Pavilion X2. It's a little budget laptop. It's kind of cute, little plasticky screens, speakers on both sides of the screen. It is a 10-inch laptop, so almost netbook sized. In fact, it is netbook sized, with an Intel Atom in it. Very netbook-like. 2 gigs of RAM. Big minus there in my book. And in fact, why even bother going any further? It's got 2 gigs of RAM. Let's pass. Granted, it starts at $300. And actually, let me dig a little deeper. Let's see if I can upgrade the RAM. Got plenty of colors. We got silver, blizzard white, who cares, and sunset red. To have it go white or red, you have to add $10. I'll pass. We can have either... Oh, it's a 32-bit processor in there. Well, you have to add $70 to make that go 64-bit, and... oh boy. The RAM is not upgradable. Pass. Alright, so... Now for the rest of these are all the HP tablets. HP has literally a ton of tablets. Literally a ton. There had to have been 15 pages of tablets to sift through. I'm not even kidding. I spent 3 hours, 3 times the length of this show, searching through HP's tablets alone. So, the rest of these are all 4 gig tablets. I'm not going to waste time with ones I don't recommend. So, we start off with the HP Tablet Pro... I already messed it up. HP Pro Tablet 608G1. This runs an Intel Atom, 1.44 gigahertz, 4 cores, 4 gigs of RAM. It's not wanting to show me the actual capacity. Oh, internal capacity, 128 gigabytes. You got your full wireless, Bluetooth, everything. You have a USB Type-C connector, as well as a docking connector and a headphone jack. I like seeing the USB Type-C, even though right now it's used for basically nothing. The reason I like seeing the Type-C is that in 2 or 3 years, when it catches on, probably even next year. Scratch what I said about 2 or 3 years. I'm willing to bet next year you're going to see it used more and more. That means you can use that sort of stuff. Now, granted, that means that for charging it, you're going to have to use that USB-C. So, there is kind of that. But this thing is $600. Kind of on the high side. That's getting pretty close to where I kind of drew the line with the Dell one. But this one is 7.8 inches. So it's a very compact tablet. In fact, those of you who have bad eyesight might have a little trouble using this one. For those of you who have good eyes like I do, and, just want something kind of small and still fully capable, this is your guy right here. You got 4 gigs of RAM, why not? Resolution is 2048 by 1536. Fantastic. I love this tablet. Moving on, we have, I think, the same one. We have the exact same one. The difference... I don't know what the difference is. Why is this one $50 more? Why is this one $50 more? This makes no sense. For $50 more, you get less storage. That makes no sense. Moving on. I have one now with the same... Oh my lord. Alright, I'm moving on. Okay, so that's the only Pro tablet. I must have gotten some doubles in here. The HP shop is weird. Take your time if you get this directly from HP, because this whole thing is a mess. We're now in the Elite pads. And when this one starts at $1,000, you know you're going to be in for a ride. The Elite pads are supposed to be the professional ones. So most of you listening to this are not going to care. But we'll go through it anyway. 1.6 gigahertz at 4 cores, 4 gigs of RAM. It's a 10-inch screen, 1920 by 1200. It has a weaker display than the other one. 128 gigabyte SSD inside. Got a system connector. System connector port, headphone jack. And the whole reason it's Pro is that it also connects to various docks. So, yeah, I'd avoid that. That's way too expensive. And here we have the same thing at $100 less. No, it's $100 less because it has 64 gigs less storage. So we move on to the same thing. The same thing. The same thing. And now we're in Pro tablets again. Oh my god. No wonder it took me forever to go through this crap. Okay, forget it. The only thing that's worth mentioning is this HP Pro Tablet 608G1. In fact, I just want to double check, make sure that the other Pro tablets I have here are all... Yeah, they're all G1s. Alright, HP Pro Tablet 608G1. It's great, a little bit on the high side, but fantastic powerhouse in a small package. Though it's still running an Atom. Now, let's move on. So next we move up to the Lenovo's. Lenovo, for those who don't know, is the laptop company that bought IBM's ThinkPad line. For those of you who know even less, the ThinkPad line was pretty much the flagship of professional laptops. So we're going to start with Lenovo with the IdeaPad Mix. Mix? M-I-I-X. I don't know what that's supposed to say. Meeks? Whatever this is. It is a 10-inch tablet, Intel Atom Bay Trail quad core, 2 gigs of RAM, 10-inch at 1280 by 800, 64 gigs internal at 250. For the price, it's not that bad, but just like with all the Dell ones, guess what? 2 gigs of RAM means suffer. Pass. Alright, so this next one is not out yet. But from what I see so far, I love this tablet. And I wish there was a price on it so I could judge it even harder. So, the IdeaPad Mix 700 uses up to a 6th generation Intel Core M7 processor. I'm not sure if that means that down the road we're going to see like M3, M5, and M7, like we do Core i3, i5, i7. That'd be kind of neat. This thing you can go up to 8 gigabytes of RAM, finally, up to 256 gigs of SSD storage, 9 hours of playback, 2160 by 1440, almost at 4K. Not quite. You know, it's a really nice tablet. The unique thing about this one is that we got full-size ports on it, and it appears to come in either gold, which is really gaudy, or this nice black, which I really like. On top of that, the hinge has kind of like this watch band look that goes onto this, this hinge kind of goes to this stand like the Surfaces do. That has a very, very, very similar keyboard to the Microsoft Surfaces. Like, it's almost exact. It's basically a Surface clone, except with a little bit of the Yoga DNA in it. That's cool. It's not out yet. It doesn't have a price, so can't do much more with it. Which then brings us to the Yoga Tablet 2. If you've done any searching for tablets, you have seen the Yoga Tablet 2. This is the tablet that it's really nice and slick, and then on one side it just seems to have like a fluorescent light bulb in it, shoved in it or something. It's just really big and bulgy out on one side. It's kind of weird. Now granted, because of that, it has a long battery life. We have 15 hours of battery life in this thing. You know, it's mostly because probably a lot of the batteries are in that bulge. So that's nice. You know, we got an Intel Atom in here. It's got got Windows 8.1, whatever. You'll upgrade that to Windows 10 anyway. You have a 32 gig solid state in there. You have micro SDs. You have an 8-inch screen, 1920 by 1080. That's real nice. Under £1. And then there's only 2 gigs of RAM. Mwah, mwah. Now, if you were going to go get a tablet that is suffering, this would be the one, because it starts at $200. But why spend $200 for a product for an anything that's just going to make you frustrated? It's just going to make you wish they took the extra effort and just soldered on 2 more gigs of RAM onto that board. Pass. Then we have the Yoga Tablet 2 with Windows 10. This is now a 10-inch tablet. Oh, I see what they did. They failed at life. They forgot the parentheses in the title. They might change that by the time you look at it. It's the Yoga Tablet 2 for Windows, but it's the 10-inch version. And it doesn't even matter why you even bother looking further into it, because it's basically the same thing, except with a 10-inch screen. Pass. So now the Lenovo Yoga Tablet 2 13. This one is kind of interesting. Again, we've got an Intel Atom on here. And don't get me wrong, the Intel Atom's fine. It's just slow. I'm going to groan a little bit because it's not like a Core M or a real Core I processor at all, but you definitely feel that you're on an Atom. So just always keep that in mind. But the nice thing is with this one, you have 4 gigs of RAM. You do have 64 gigs, like a lot of the tablets I've been talking about, though didn't mention it because I forgot to. It does have a micro SD card slot. Pretty much all the tablets I mentioned, except for I think the HP one, all have a micro SD card slot on them. You got a nice battery on there because it's got that huge bulge on the one side. This one also has the option for a keyboard to be included. The problem is that the keyboard cannot connect directly. It has to connect through Bluetooth, which means the keyboard has to be charged. Wah, wah. But this one starts at $450, so it's a better option than all the other ones so far as cost-wise. But the one I'm most interested in, and this is actually my favorite on the whole list, even the ones after this. Sorry, rest of the list. And that's the ThinkPad 10. Of course, the computer enthusiast is going to like the ThinkPad the best out of them. Yeah, probably. That's a pretty safe bet. The reason I like this one the best is because, again, you got an Intel Atom, which, that's my only complaint about it, that it's got an Intel Atom. Otherwise, you got 4 gigs of RAM, plenty for a tablet, 10-inch screen on it, 1920 by 1080, decent enough resolution, not the best in the world, but it's definitely going to be more than enough. You either get 64 gigs internal or 128 internal. Got a micro SD card slot on this one as well. But the thing that's really interesting about this is that, first off, it's flat. It is as a tablet should be. It is just a slate of machine. However, at first glance, you'll notice that on one side of it, it's curved on the corners, and on the other side, it's not. It's at sharp corners. And the reason being is, you guessed it, there's a keyboard dock with this. That makes it look like a little 10-inch ThinkPad netbook thing. And there's, in fact, quite a whole slew of different connectors on it. So, in any case, this is one I would definitely check out if you're looking for a nice portability laptop. Or a nice productivity tablet. I messed up every word in that previous sentence. That was amazing. And this one starts at $494.10. So, not the cheapest option in the world, but it's the best of all the worlds. And then we've got a ThinkPad Helix. This one, it's basically the same as the ThinkPad 10, but you got an Intel Core M in it. I wouldn't recommend this one, honestly. And the main reason being is that bumping up your game to a Core M and adding on $450, ugh, that's gross. That's really, really gross. I mean, granted, it's going to work faster, but for that much money, I mean, it's $950. If you're that desperate, go get a real laptop. Just go get one. There's plenty out there. The whole point of a tablet is for it to be nice and cheap and light and just ready to roll. At that kind of money, you're missing the cheap aspect. There's plenty of laptops that fit the rest of the bill. Anyway, we're way over, and I still got how many more makers to go? I got 2 more to go. 3 more to go. I got a number to go. I'll be right back. Welcome back, Eagle Eyes on Tech. I am Eagle Falcon. I love that song so much. Let's move on, though. It's time for some computer lore. The Mac Pro, the descendant of the Power Mac. If you were a movie editor back in the day, you got a Power Mac. You are a Mac user and you wanted real work to get done, you got a Power Mac. That thing would just keep on chugging. Uniquely built for Apple, by Apple. What else is there to say? It's a Power Mac. You wanted power, it was there. The Mac Pro is what eventually became of the Power Mac after they switched to Intel. And I'm not going to be the one to debate whether switching to Intel was the right choice or not. In the end, it was the right choice at the time. The G5 couldn't keep up. Could it have gotten better? Who knows? There's no point in arguing about it now. It's been done. They're on Intel now, and Intel's just been chugging along, pushing forward, getting far better than anyone thought they'd ever would. But a lot of you probably remember the Mac Pro was relaunched as a black cylinder. This struck a lot of people as really odd. And the reason it struck a lot of people as really odd is because you have now taken a behemoth of a tower that had plenty of flexibility, plenty of upgradability, and shrunk it down into a really large desk ornament. And here's the thing. If you have a workstation, you don't care about the size. I've got 3 screens in front of me as part of my workstation setup. 2 22 inchers, 1 24 incher right in the center. There are plenty of other people who have better rigs than I do. But that's my setup right now, and I've got a big honkin' 2-foot tall tower next to it. I don't even remember that it's there. Except when it comes to maintenance day of the month, and blow out all the dust. That's the only time I remember that I have a 2-foot tower there. So, why the shrinking? It didn't make sense. Maybe it's just me, and every other person I've ever talked to ever about the issue. But then again, size doesn't mean everything. And in fact, the Mac Pro packs quite a bit of a punch. The one I've spec'd out is one of the highest end you can get. You have a 2.7 gigahertz 12-core Xeon processor. I just like saying the word Xeon. Makes it seem like I'm an evil villain. We've got the RAM maxed out, 64 gigs of RAM, more than enough for whatever nonsense you're planning. We got a 512 gigabyte PCI-based SSD in there. We've got dual AMD FirePro D500s. Now, it took me a while to research up exactly what a D500 is. Because if you look up and try to part it out, you can't find a FirePro D500. It is a custom chip just for this Mac Pro. Now, for starters, this is one of the first times that dual graphic cards are allowed in a Mac Pro. That's neat. You know what else it is? It is the first time that a professional Mac product is not offered in dual processors. 12 cores is the maximum. That's it. If you're doing something crazier that requires more, you're out of luck. And then we have a basic Apple mouse and a basic keyboard. You know, nothing real fancy. I'm not here to try and just jack up the price as high as I can. So for this one, that's a well above average, but still modest Mac Pro. As much of a contradiction as those two words are together. This Mac Pro is priced at $8,597. Now, first off, if that guy from 4chan is listening to me, the one who priced out how much it would cost to build this exact same machine, and then see how many Pop-Tarts it would take to fill up the gap, please still do that. I'd still love to see that. That was hilarious. That you came up... Well, it was he came up like $3 short, and knew I wouldn't let him add any more Pop-Tarts, and he was so disappointed by it. It was hilarious. But I'm not here to see how many Pop-Tarts it takes to cover the distance. I'm here to compare it to real computers. First off, we're going to start with Dell. As much garbage as I give Dell, I actually do love their precision line. But a solid machine. And we're going to compare the... Oh, come on. Move out of the way. There we go. We're going to compare it to the top of the line for Dell. The Dell Precision Tower 7910. This is a much bigger footprint. You could fit 2 Mac Pros into the space that you can this tower. I am not here to look at aesthetics. Although personally I prefer the Dell to the Mac Pro, because the Dell's much easier to clean. Much more airflow, it's going to run much quieter. One thing that was a bit of a disappointment is that I could not find the exact same Xeon that they're using in the Apple one. I did some research. It turns out they're using, like, the E5 2695 or something like that. No, they can't be. It was like the 92. or something along those lines. The thing is that I actually built 3 different workstations from 3 different companies. None of them have this Xeon chip in them. None of them have that option. I don't know where Apple got this chip, but it's not available. So I went one step down to the 2680. This is a 12-core processor, 2.5 gigahertz. So we are off by 200 megahertz. Whoop-de-doo. It's still the same amount of cache and everything. And in fact, anything, it's probably running at a low... In fact, anything is probably going to run better because you've got a lot more airflow through something like that. Alright, so we've also got 2 AMD FirePro W7100s. It's about the closest you could get to what the Apple has. We've got 64 gigs of RAM, same as the Apple, and we've got a 512 gig PCI-based SSD. Now, one thing to note: this configuration I have currently is impossible according to Dell. You can't have the PCI Express solid-state drive with dual video cards with a single processor. You'd have to add a second processor or switch how you're doing your SSD by going to SATA or something like that. The reason being is that it's not on the mini PCI Express bus like it is on the Apple one. It's on the full PCI Express bus. Much more bandwidth, much faster, and a lot bigger, too. So it's a much higher quality SSD. So you'd have to sacrifice a graphic card or go dual 6 cores. Which you can do on this because it is a dual socket machine, like workstations are supposed to be. This one, as it's configured right now, $7,096.25. So, a full $1,500 plus than the Mac Pro. Next up, we move to the HP Z840. Again, their top tier system. The highest end they got. I've got the same E5 2680 processor in there. 12 cores, 2.5 gigahertz. No second processor. I did have to upgrade the power supply on this one. That is an option apparently. I didn't see an option on the Dell to do that. Then there is no option on the Apple one because they only give you 4 options. I lied, they give you 6 options. Just like on the other ones, we got 64 gigs of RAM. We've got, again, a PCI Express 512 gig solid-state drive. And again, full-size PCI Express. Not mini. Not M2. Not anything of the sort. So, that's kind of a bummer, but it's still going to be much faster than the M2. And again, on this one, we've got 2 AMD FirePro W7100s. However, the ones they use have 8 gigs for graphic buffer. So let me actually go over that real quick, because the HP ones have 8 gigs, the Dells have 4 gigs per card, and the Apple one has 3 gigs per. The Apple one I know has 3 gigs per because it's a custom chip, and they just sacrificed one of the chips because they had to try and fit a GPU in there that powerful. I don't know why the HP one has 8 gigs on it. Oh, I take that back. The HP one does have only 4 gigs on it. It's 8 gigs total. They are just really dumb in how they labeled this. And for whatever reason, in the model number it says 8 gigs, but it's only 4 gigs, but it's saying 8 gigs because I have 2 of them. So I don't know. Oh, God. HP, your site is terrible. It doesn't even matter because the summary, this thing comes up to $9,256. So it actually goes higher than the Mac Pro. Pass. And then finally, Lenovo. Oh, Lenovo. Oh, how you... something. Anyway. Lenovo actually had the option for a middle ground to what, from what I've been using and what Apple actually had. So I've got a 12-core chip, 2.6 gigahertz per core, same bus, same TDP, same everything on those lines. I've got 64 gigs of RAM. Unfortunately, the Lenovo doesn't use AMDs at all. They only use NVIDIA Quadros. So that's a bit of a bummer. It just means that we have to use NVIDIA Quadro K2200s instead of the W7100s. It's close to the same thing. Performance-wise, it's basically neck and neck. I'm not sure about cost-wise, seeing as how... Well, cost-wise, it doesn't even matter, because they get it for less and then upcharge whatever the heck they feel like. So we got 2 of those in there. And we've got our... We actually do have an M2 512 gig PCI Express SSD in here. So it is actually much, much, much closer to what the Mac Pro has. And then I've got no hard drive in there. And the thing is that you have to have a hard drive in these. Otherwise it just throws errors, which is kind of a bummer. But without the hard drive in there, we've got a total cost of $8,220.60 for the Lenovo ThinkStation P900, which comes up only $300 cheaper than the Mac Pro. So actually, kind of surprisingly, I expected this to be kind of a blowout. Everything drastically undercutting the Mac Pro, but it didn't. It's a bit surprising. The only one that did was Dell. Dell was under by like $1,500. It was just astonishing. But the main point is flexibility. When you get a workstation, you want to be able to configure it however you want. You're getting it for a specific purpose. Whether it be to edit videos, create 3D models, do scientific research, whatever it may be. You want to customize it for specifically whatever you're doing. The Mac Pro, you only can have one processor. And you only have 4 options of processor. A quad-core, a 6-core, an 8-core, and a 12-core. And they intentionally pick versions of the processor that have a really high clock speed and run really hot. And that, to me, with a design like this, is kind of shocking. The Dell one, let me tell you, there are, 30 options here? I've got 15 different processor options for single processor. I've got the same 15 for dual socket. I've got another 10 options for liquid-cooled processors. I can customize this thing to do whatever I want. I can even do something crazy and pop in to whatever's in here. I mean, it's nonsense. What else can I toss in here? I can toss in up to 8 hard drives. CD-ROMs, an extra sound card, additional storage devices. Oh, that's just the media card reader. Nobody cares about that. Nobody cares about that on a... I take that back. A professional photographer would definitely care about that. I apologize to all professional photographers out there. My bad. You actually do want your BD card reader, and you want it bad. This is an oversight on my part. I apologize. You can add additional network cards. You can add a Thunderbolt card. That was the thing. My price even included adding a Thunderbolt card to it. Because that's the one thing the Mac Pro has for it. It has 6 Thunderbolt ports on there. And it has that for all the expansion. The thing is that you try to do what I could do on a Dell Precision, and it's going to look like a squid coming out the back after spending thousands of dollars on external RAIDs. It's just why? It's the same thing with the HP. I can go quad graphic cards on this thing. No, I can go triple graphic cards. I'm sorry. I can add some Tesla computing cards in there. I can do a metric ton of things to this thing. The ThinkStation was even more so, with what looks like 50 plus different CPU options, some that weren't even available on the other two. Downgraded all the way to Windows 7. I could on the other ones too, but the RAM I could even go up to 64 gig chips. In fact, let's see how much RAM I could pop into this thing as soon as it stops thinking. I can go first, second, 2 graphic cards. I can add a Tesla card in here as well for external computing. I can add an Intel coprocessor in here as well. I mean, I can turn this thing into a small supercomputer. And I'm not going to be able to see how much RAM I can add to it because this page is taking forever to load. So, scratch that. It's going to be 64 times 8. Whatever that is, I don't have a calculator in front of me. It's a stupid amount of RAM. I want to say 512. Something like that. But there's that. The Dell clearly wins this battle. And Apple by far loses. I mean, HP loses pretty hard too because $9,000 to compete with the Mac Pro? Really? Now, maybe I could have done better by going with the Z640. Go with the lower end model. The main reason you go for the big workstations is because there's more flexibility, there's more stuff you can add to it. And I really did that to state a point. In that the Mac Pro, you used to be able to add 4 hard drives internally. They were one of the first ones to do 4 hard drives internally. You could pop, they had 4 PCI Express 16X slots in there. The spacing limited though, so you could only have 2 graphic cards in there, and then an SSD if you wanted to, or an add-on card. You could do whatever you wanted in there. It was dual processor. You had plenty of RAM in there. And they made that interior look so nice and neat. They were the ones that pushed Dell, HP, and Lenovo to redo the interior on these workstations so that they looked nice. Apple pushed them there. You can't argue with that. It's simply the truth. Apple did it first, and then all of a sudden you see HP launch the Z line that pretty much cleaned up the entire place. Had the entire interior be completely toolless, just like the Mac Pro. Dell followed soon after, with the T7600. Now granted, the line before it wasn't too bad. It was cleaner than it used to be in the, what was it, the X60 series, I think is what it was, if I remember right. And Lenovo, until recently, their interior was atrocious. It looked like it was built in a garage. And that's all on Lenovo. Because ThinkPad, not ThinkPad. Yeah, ThinkPad made their own laptops. IBM did a much cleaner layout. IBM, in fact, had cold swap front-mounted hard drives that Dell eventually adopted. It's just so sad to see Apple go ahead and do this. And if every other major manufacturer follows in Apple's footsteps like this, I am going to be extremely disappointed. They should all be slapped. Now, if the flagship towers cut down in size, but just restrict themselves to only using, like, laptop hard drives and more compressed space like that, that's fine. I'm okay with that. But to just go ahead and say the only storage on here is just an M2 slot, and that's it? No. That's not acceptable. Not on any terms. Well, we got more tablets to go through. I'll be right back.
How did I end up here?
Welcome back, Eagle Eyes on Tech. I am eaglefalcon. We got 3 more brands to go through. So let's start with Acer. My favorite brand to hate. Acer, for those who don't know, they are a company that bought up a lot of other failing tech companies. The 2 of note are eMachine, the tower company that was kinda good, and then put power supplies that were rated way too low for what they were doing, and just always blew smoke. And then they bought up Gateway, which, well, Gateway made some very, very good products. And then just very quickly went downhill after about Windows Vista. They had some decent and interesting professional equipment, like the Profile All-in-One line, but, you know, their consumer line just went downhill after that. They actually had some really decent budget machines. Like, I had a $400 Gateway, and that thing took a pounding. It was amazing. But it was really underpowered. And it's a shame. They could have done so much better, but they just kind of faded away, and then Acer ate them, and then a moment of silence for Gateway. Anyway, back to these tablets. So we're going to start with the Acer Iconia Tab 8W. Because why not? The Iconia Tab 8W, which also is the product number of W1-810-11UC, is an 8-inch tablet, 1280 by 800, with an Intel Atom quad-core processor, 1.33 gigahertz. Okay, it's kind of low, but okay. 32 gigs of SSD, and 1 gig of... pass. 1 gig of RAM. Seriously? Come on. Then we have a different model for $20 more, and still only has 1 gig of RAM. I don't care that these things are $130, $150. Why bother? The things aren't going to run. So we move on to the W4 series, the Iconia W4. Another 8-inch tablet, running an Intel quad-core Atom, 1.33 gigahertz, 2 gigs of RAM, 32 gigs flash, and once again, 2 gigs of RAM. That is less than 4. Pass. And then, the same thing, for $50 more. Pass. So we move to the Iconia W7P, the productivity tablet, at 11.6 inches. 1920 by 1080, really good. Got a Core i5, dual core, 1.7 gigahertz. Okay, battery life's probably going to be bad, but, we got progress. 4 gigs of RAM, 128 gig SSD. We're getting somewhere. Yes, it has a keyboard option, has a stylus option. It's plastic, but, what do you expect? It's Acer. I mean, this has to be for a decent $1,050. Why, Acer? You had one job. Make a cheap, affordable tablet that worked. Didn't have to work for long, it just had to work. And you've made 4 tablets that don't work at all, And one tablet that does work and isn't cheap. You have failed at being Acer. Good job. So we move on to Asus. Now, come on. Asus has to do me proud. Asus is like the underdog of the tech industry, making decent products, and coming in from out of nowhere with an amazing idea, and just really throwing a left hook to everyone. The first ones to do a 2-in-1, and the first ones to do a netbook. They really just come out of the blue. So here we have an 8-inch tablet, 1280 by 800. Okay. An Intel Atom at 1.8 gigahertz, quad core. Okay. 32 gigs of storage. Okay. Not much confidence, and 1 gig of RAM. God dang it. Oh, and then we move on to the Asus Vivio Tab Smart. 10-inch screen, 1366 by 768. That is really bad for a display, but okay. It's somewhere. A dual-core Atom, that's way behind the times, but okay. 64 gigs internal storage. Okay, a step up. 2 gigs of RAM. 2 gigs of RAM. Not even bother looking at it. So Asus failed me. Moving on to Toshiba. Finally at last. The company I keep forgetting about. Remember when Toshiba actually had good products? Well, maybe they can save us this time. So we're going to start off with the Toshiba Encore 2. I take that back. Yeah, okay, it is the Encore 2. It just has a very weird number behind it. So, with the Toshiba Encore 2, with an Intel Atom, quad-core, 1.8 gigahertz, okay. 32 gigs onboard storage, okay. 1 gig of RAM. $180. Pass. And then, last, we have the Toshiba Portage WT20. Intel Core M, 4 gigs of RAM, 128 gigs SATA solid state, or it's mSATA, I'm sorry. mSATA solid state, so the predecessor to M2. Okay, not bad. $900. I'd then go over how much it would be with all of these accessories, but why bother? $900 for a Core M? The Surface does it better. And I'd go over the Surfaces, but you already know the deal. It's $500 for the baseline, and the baseline only has 2 gigs of RAM. You're better off going up to the Surface 4 Pro rather than the Surface 3. And the Surface 4 Pro has a hefty price tag. And it puts it rather higher than the other ones I've gone over at the base end. But I've already gone over that in a different video. So check out last week's if you want more details on the Surfaces. In the end, I've gone through every other manufacturer. All of them. I spent 6 hours doing this research. 6 hours! What do I have to show for it? 3 usable Windows tablets. That's it. Guys, pick up your game. And the killer part about all this is what kills them is the RAM. RAM is one of the cheapest things you can toss in a computer. Hands down. Even soldered on chips are very inexpensive compared to every other component. I mean, it's not that hard. Just make a budget tablet. Just put in just some 1280 by 800 screen. Sure, it might not be the best one in the world, but who cares? You're going for budget. You cheap out on the screen. Just go 720p. Put an Intel Atom. You know, some quad-core thing or whatever. The quad-core one I know is about as cheap as the dual-core one, so you might as well go quad-core. Just let the integrated Intel chip and the Atom work. Put in 32 gigs of RAM, give a micro SD slot, and put in 4 gigs of RAM. Even at $250 or $300, this would be a home run in my book. And you wouldn't doubt me either. You would be more than happy to pick up that tablet and go, man, this thing is lickety-split. It's not going to replace my laptop anytime soon, but it doesn't have to, because the whole point of a tablet is to just be computing on the go. And the nice thing with running Windows 10 is that you could do some quick coding on the go. You could do some quick word processing on the go. You do quick Excel spreadsheeting. You could run a few games real quick. You could run that MMO or whatever. You could do all sorts of things. Like, I've gotten a little Atom-based thing running WoW at decent frame rate. You could run World of Warcraft on these things if they had the RAM. It's just so disheartening to see something that could be amazing and just see it get held back by the cheapest component in the entire system. And it doesn't have to be that way. It shouldn't be that way. I hate leaving on such a downer, but that's just the truth. Windows 10 is doing everything in its power, and I think it's doing a great job of trying to be an operating system that can function on anything. It might not be the best phone operating system. I mean, obviously. It's not quite at the point where it's got all the app support to really compete head-to-head with Android or iOS. But Windows Phone could easily be the new BlackBerry, the professional phone. And I could talk a bit more about that, about why that is. But it could easily be the productivity tablet. Yeah, sure, go get an iPad to play Angry Birds on while you're waiting in the dentist's office. Or an Android tablet to do basic web browsing or watch Netflix in bed. But if you wanted to get some real work done, and just be out in the road, and not have to worry about bringing a big honking laptop to get something done, you could easily grab one of these. But there's so few options that are really worthwhile. Well, that's it for me. This is probably the longest episode yet. And maybe I should just go to 2 hours. We might already be there as it is. Rest well, everyone. Take care, and good night. Or good morning. Or whatever time of day is. I don't know. How do I close these things out? Whatever, take care, everyone.